Hi, in this video I'm going to show how to create CSS art with a single element and gradients. First, I'm going to explain how CSS gradients work. It's going to be something simple, not a deep dive, basically what we need for our drawing. And then I'm going to do a cartoon that, because it's around Christmas time, I'm going to do a Christmas tree. First, we're going to place a div inside the body, and this is going to be the canvas for a drawing. Now we're going to make it a square, so let's give it a width of, let's say, 50 vmin, and then we're going to say aspect ratio of 1. With that, we're saying have a width of 50 vmin, and because of the aspect ratio is 1, the height is going to be also 50 vmin. It's going to be a square. And just so it's visible, we're going to put background, and we're going to give it a semi-transparent red. Now, just for the demo purposes, and I'm going to put it here, demo, we're going to put it in the center of the screen, both horizontally and vertically. This is an interesting question that comes often as a problem for CSS, and it's really simple to center with CSS. Let's see how it's done. We're going to say display grid, and then place items center. And with that, we're going to center, it's going to center horizontally to begin with. And that's because we don't have a height. So we need to say, hey, the body, is going to have a height of 100 VH. And like that, we're going to remove the margin of 16 that all the browsers have by default. And that's how you center an element or a div within the body. And it only takes like 2 lines of code, and you will need to specify the height, otherwise it's only going to center horizontally, but you want to do it both ways, horizontally and vertically, so you specify the height. Now that we have the div, let's close the JavaScript tab, we don't need it, and let's make this a little bit larger. What we're going to do is talk about the gradients. There are many types of CSS gradients, and we're going to see them one by one. First, the linear gradient, then the radial gradient, and finally the conic gradient. Each of them have another type, a repeating mode, let's say it that way, and we're going to see them too. Let's start with the linear gradients. A linear gradient is a transition between colors that happens along a line. That's why it's linear. So let's put it here, and we're going to say background image, and we're going to make it a linear gradient of red to blue. It will start by default from the top and go to the bottom. So that's why when we say red blue, it's going to take this line from top to bottom, and the top is going to be red, the bottom is going to be blue, and it's going to generate the transition between the two colors along the line. Now, we can change this a little. We can say, oh, I want the red color to start from 0, but I also want it to go to the halfway of the picture. So we can say 50%. And now red starts from the top, goes until 50, and then it starts the transition to blue. If we wanted to make a cat red and then a cat directly to blue, what we can do is the second color, we can put the same percentage as before. Or if you want to save some typing, you can put a 0. This is convenient because sometimes you may not know which value is going to be here, but then you could use it here anyway. But 0 is a good way of doing it. It is important to know that you don't need to have only 2 colors. You can put more than 2, like for example green. So now we'll go from red to green and from green to blue. And because we didn't specify percentages, the browser automatically is going to separate them, at the same distance. So this is going to be at the 0% red, 50% green, 100% blue. Let's remove the green And let's try another thing. Now you may say, hey, this is going top to bottom, but what if I wanted to go from bottom to top? Well, you can specify the direction of the line, and to do that, you do it before the colors. So in this case, if we want to go to top, we will say to top at the beginning, starting in red and then in blue. And you can see that the colors flipped. Now red is at the bottom and goes to the top blue. In the same way, you can say to right, and then the left side will be red, the right side will be blue, to left too, and they flip colors. You not only can use these keywords, you can also to top left, for example, and you see then it's starting from the bottom right corner and it's going to the top left corner. Or you can specify colors, degrees. So let's start. 0 would be a vertical one from bottom to top, and then it's going to be clockwise. So if I say 90 degrees, then it's going to turn the colors 90 degrees. The red will be here on the left side and the blue will be here on the right side. Let's see. There it is. But it doesn't have to be an exact color. You can say, for example, hey, I want it to be 33 degrees. And like that, it's not really obvious how it looks, but right now there's an angle of 33 degrees here. And maybe it's more obvious if I say 50% here and 0. And you can see that it's following a line that is not exactly from one corner to the other. There are other things that you can do, but for now, this is all that we're going to need for CSS art. There's one trick that I learned from Temani Afif, and I find it really interesting, and is this one. And let me show it to you. And it's that sometimes when you want to do CSS art, you want to make a square that is only one color. You can do it like this, for example, by specifying 2 different colors and the second one will have a 0. Or the trick from Temani is that you can put just one color and they say 0, 0. And you're saying this color is going to have a stop point in 0 and 0. And automatically the whole background is that color. This may not seem really useful right now, but when you're dealing with backgrounds that are different sizes, it becomes really important and really interesting. Before we move to the radial gradient, there's something that I want to show that is really important and applies to all the CSS gradients, and is the order in which they are put. You can have more than one gradient, and the order in which they show up, it's really important. So let me do one thing. Let's put a gradient that goes from blue to transparent. So you see it starts in blue and then go to transparent. We see it pink or semi-transparent red because that is the default color, background color. So what I mentioned is if I put another linear gradient here, that is going to be to right and it's going to be green to yellow. You can see that we can separate the different background or the different gradients using a comma. And the first one always goes on top. So this is really important because it has a transparency. We can see the background below. So we see from blue to transparent, and then in the background of that one, we have another gradient that goes to right from green to yellow, like that. This one doesn't have a transparency. So if we put it first, we are not going to be able to see through it, and then our blue to transparent gradient is going to be hidden. Let's see. There you have it. Right now we don't see the blue. That's because the colors are not transparent, so we cannot see through the next gradient. So this is important. The order of the gradients is going to be essential for your CSS art. Next, we have the radial gradients. Let's remove these ones and let's put a radial gradient that, again, we can specify two colors only if we want to, red and blue. So the radial gradient is a gradient that radiates. That means that start from one point and then it grows in every direction. And that's what it's doing here. By default, it's going to be in the center of the element and is going to grow proportionally towards each of the sides. Because we have a square, the radial gradient is going to be a circle by default because it's going to be in the center and it's at the same distance from every side, so it's going to be a circle. Now, we can do the same thing as with the linear gradients. We can put the percentages here of how far we want them. Or, we can have more than one color. This one is a little bit trickier sometimes, and it's because if we move it, we can move it, like the center by default is, the origin is in the center by default, but we can specify at 50% 0. And then is telling that it needs to grow from 50% horizontally and 0 vertically. And then again is going to grow proportionally to all the sides. To the top side, it's empty because there's nothing to grow to. To the bottom side is larger than to the left and right sides. That's why now, instead of looking like a circle, it looks like an ellipse. We can change that by saying, hey, I want to be a circle. And then the radial gradient is going to be a circle. But by default, it's going to be, again, the same distance proportional to the distance of the sides. Again, instead of saying circle, we can say 50%, 50%, or 100%, 100%, things like that. And that will determine from the center, or from the origin, not the center, from the origin to the side. As with the linear gradients, we can stack them. So for example, if we say red to transparent, and let's remove this, let's leave it at the center. And now we can stack another radial gradient. And let's make it, for example, blue to transparent, and it's going to start at 50%, 100%. So remember, horizontally 50%, vertically 100%. So we are combining two different radial gradients. But it doesn't have to be radial gradients. We can mix different gradients of different types. So I can make this one a linear gradient. And instead of being blue to transparent, let's make it, let's leave it blue to transparent. And then let's have another. That was the one we did earlier, from green to yellow and to the right. So now we have the background, you see, has three different combined gradients. A radial gradient that is in the middle, red to transparent. A vertical gradient from top to bottom that starts in blue and then it's transparent. And then another linear gradient from left to right that starts in green and finishes in yellow. Last but not least, we have the conic gradient. This is a really interesting gradient, and let's put two colors again, because it radiates from one point, but it doesn't do it like the radial gradient that is in every direction. It does it rotating from that point until it becomes a circle. So you see, now we say red to blue, and it starts vertically, and then it rotates 360 degrees until it gets to blue, and it transitions the color following that circular pattern. As with the other ones, we can specify more than one color, like for example, red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. And that way we can create kind of like actually, if we put red again, we can create something that resembles a color wheel. And it's really interesting because it allows us to create something that can look like a pie chart, or is a pie chart. So we can say, hey, the red color is going to have 60% of the rotation. Then the orange, as we mentioned, is going to start directly from 60% and it's going to go to 75%. And then the yellow is going to start from there forward. And you can see that way we have created something that resembles a pie chart, especially if we say border radius 50%. Now it really looks like a pie chart, but that's not what we're going to do here. Anyway, this is what we do with the gradients. We saw the linear gradient, the radial gradient, and the conic gradient. All of them work in a different way and can be really useful to create CSS art. And that's what we're going to do now. But before, I need to talk about something that I mentioned, that was the repeating versions of the gradients. And for this, I'm going to make the drawing a little bit bigger, like that. And I'm going to show it with the linear gradient. So for the linear gradient, for example, imagine that we can say red and blue. It's going to go from top red to bottom blue. But imagine that we want to do red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, like 5 times. So we could do that by putting red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, and then it will generate it. But that's kind of a pain. So what we can say is, hey, I want to have a repeating linear gradient that is going to be red and blue. And what we do is that we need to specify, and this is really important, the endpoint. And in this case, it's 20% if we want it 5 times. And you can see that it's doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what we can do is, if we want to transition better, I think we can put here a 0. In this case, it doesn't matter. but that's the idea, is repeating this linear gradient 5 times. There's a different way of doing it. And we're going to see it now, obviously. But and it's so far we have only seen the linear gradients, how they're done, occupying the whole thing. But when you want to do CSS art, you may want them to be just a little tiny bit here. So it doesn't make sense that they occupy the whole thing. You can fix that by specifying a size. And we're going to do it with the linear gradient only, instead of with the repeating linear gradient. So now what we can do is background size, and we can specify the size horizontally and vertically. So this one is going to be 20% wide, and it's going to be 50% high. And now you say, hey, if it's only 2050, why is it occupying the whole thing? And that's because by default, the background repeats itself. And that's why it's not repeating horizontally and vertically. So we need to say background, repeat, no repeat. And that way, the background is not going to repeat, and now it's 20% wide and 50% height. That is what we specified here. Then we can specify the position. So we can say background position. And this is going to be a little bit tricky because working with percentages and the backgrounds can be a little bit of a pain sometimes. But if instead of wanting it in this corner that is by default top left, we want it in the center of the screen, we would say 50%, 50%. And then that's how our background is going to be positioned in the center. Now, if we want it to be like 2525, 2550, we have to say 2550, and it will move there. And I mentioned that it's tricky because 25 is not the starting point here. The funny thing is that 25 is the middle point here. So when we say 25 is for the middle point, and then it's going to grow in both directions to occupy the 20%. And the same thing happens with the 50. So, well, and not in both directions. That's the tricky part that I mentioned. Because if I say go to 100%, it's not growing in both directions. Now it's only growing up. And that's the problem when working with percentages and backgrounds, that it can be tricky. It would be easier if I specify, I know it's 80 vmin, so I can say I wanted 40 vmin from the top, or 60, and then our background is going to kind of disappear because it cannot overflow the content. It's its background. So you can do backgrounds both ways. You can specify the percentages, but it can be a little bit tricky. It's convenient, but tricky. Or you can specify an absolute value. The good thing about using percentages is that if you change the size, like for example now to 40 vmin, we don't see the background. But if instead of using here we put 100% and then we change to 40, because we're using percentages, is going to be responsive. So percentages may be a little bit tough to wrap at the beginning, but then it's easier to work with them later. And they have other advantages, like for example, again, responsiveness. Now, you may have seen that I have created the background image, the size, and the position. That is a way that I used to do CSS art before, and is one like any other. Like I could add another one here, let's say from green to yellow. And because we have two backgrounds and only one size and one position, is going to apply the same the size and position to both backgrounds. But if I separate them with a comma and I say, hey, the background size of the second one is going to be 33%, 33%. It's going to be a square, and it's going to be 100% and 0. That means that it's going to be in this corner here. Oh, sorry. 50%, 50% for. So the first one is going to be 50-50. Red to blue is in the center. And then the second one is going to be 100% horizontally and 0% vertically. So you see, they apply in the same order in which they appear. Now, this is how I used to do CSS art. I found it easy, and I think that for beginners, it may be easier to do it that way, especially if you use comments. You can say, hey, these are squares. And then if you're doing some other part, you can tag them and know exactly which each of them is. But then you need to do the same thing in the size and the position, otherwise it gets a little bit confusing. And this is again where other developers, like for example, Lynn Fisher, that is the expert that organizes Devtober, and she does a lot of CSS art with a single element. She does it this way. Temani Afif, that we mentioned before, and I'm sorry for butchering your name, showed me a different way of doing it. Instead of using background image, we can just say background. And then we can specify everything in one line. We can specify the gradient, then we can specify the position, that would be 50-50 for the first one, and then we put a slash and we put the size. And we can do the same one for the second one. So the position is 100, 0, and then the background size is 33. And by doing that, we can delete these blocks from here and just keep everything in one line. So if you do it this way, it can be a little bit cleaner because you can see the gradient, its position, and its size, and it's everything there. You don't need to be jumping from one to another. Especially that can be a problem when you have a lot of elements or a lot of backgrounds. Then you will need to be jumping a lot in the code, like, oh, where is this, where is that? This way you have everything in one place. It makes it simpler, but the notation can be a little bit more complicated, especially for beginners. But if you get used to it, it would be good. I think it's nicer. My main problem with this was getting used to doing position and size, because mentally, for some reason, I was always thinking size, position, and I always put them the other way around. And this is the way that we're going to follow for our drawing. And now it's when we're going to start to draw. Yay, finally. Needless to say, before we start drawing, all this presentation about gradients was kind of short and not in depth. It was more of an introduction, so we can do the CSS art in a second. And if you have any question, please feel free to put it in the comments. But now let's start the drawing finally. Let's remove these backgrounds. I think I'm going to remove this aspect ratio, and I'm going to say, or I'm going to do 1, 2 maybe. That may be too much. 1.5, something like that. Yeah, a little bit better. So what we're going to do is that, as I mentioned, we're going to do a Christmas tree. So what we can do is, let's start with a conic gradient. So for the conic gradient, what we're going to do is that we're going to put the conic gradient at top, and we're going to make it form a triangle. So let's see how it's done. Let's start putting a conic gradient, and we're going to make it, we want it to be at 50%, 0%. So it's going to be at the top in the middle, and it's going to be transparent, that we can either write transparent, the keyword, or if we want to type less, we can do 0, 0, 0, 0. That is just a transparent black. And we're going to make it, let's say, remember that it starts up, so it would be 90 plus at least 45, so let's put 150 degrees. Then we want it to be green. It's going to start there. And we want it to go, if we did 150 to make it symmetrical, because 180 would be the vertical, it's going to be 210 degrees. And then we're going to make it transparent again. Now, the problem that we have is that this is too big. Not a problem. What we need to do is what we were doing before. We specify the position, that in this case is going to be 50% 0, although that's not going to import or matter much when we say our width is going to be 100% and the height is going to be 20%. Let's say it that way. So we have the top part of our Christmas tree. Maybe let's make it a little bit bigger. Maybe that's too big. Let's leave it at 20. Now we need to do a second one, right? So what we're going to do first is we're going to use CSS variables or custom properties. We don't want to, because what we're going to do basically is copy the previous gradient, and instead of making it 20% tall, we're going to make it 40. And now, or 50 actually, interesting. And now instead of making it 150, we're going to make it 160, and this is going to be 200. Okay? And the problem that we have here is that we're using green, and we're defining colors. But what happens if we want to change the green? We will have, we want it to be lime green. Now we will need to change in a lot of places. So instead of doing that, we're going to use the custom properties, and we're going to say our green is going to be, let's say, 080. And then instead of using the, let's put green actually, so we keep it the same. Instead of putting green, we're going to say variable green, and we're going to do the same thing here. And if for any reason we want to change our Christmas tree, and instead of being green we want it to be white, we just change the color in one place and it changes automatically. So let's put it back to green, and let's start making some small changes. I didn't like that I changed this to this, so let me put it back. What we're going to do is that instead of having it from the top, we're going to move it a little bit to the bottom. And yeah, we need to make the angle a little bit smaller, but not 160. Let's make it 155 and 205. Okay. And finally, this may be too big, so let's make it 40. That may be too small now, but it's okay. We're going to do one more. So we're going to do the same. We copy, paste here. And now instead of making it starting in 10, we're going to make it starting 20. And instead of 40, we're going to make it 70. Ooh, that's too much. So, oh yeah, the angle. So let's make it now the 160 and 200. And we have kind of a tree here. Now we want to do the tree trunk. So for that, what we're going to do is a linear gradient. And we're going to put here, this is the leaves. And now we're going to do the trunk that is going to be behind it. And because it's going to be behind, would it go on top or at the bottom? We said that the ones that appear on top are going to be on top also in the drawing, but we want it to be in the back of the leaves, so we need to put it behind them. So let's put here the trunk of the tree, and we said it's going to be a linear gradient, and it's going to be brown 0, 0. That's the trick to make a square. To make it the same color in less typing. Then we're going to say the position is going to be 50%, 100%, so it's in the middle here at the bottom. And then we're going to make it 20% wide by 50% tall. Maybe that's too much, so let's make it 15 wide, something like that maybe. Then we're going to make this a little bit taller. Yeah, I like that a little bit more. And then instead of brown, let's make it Indian red color. Yes, it's a little bit like lighter brown. And with this, we have the basic shape of the tree. Now what we can do is decorate it. So the decoration is going to be on top of the tree. So it needs to go on top of everything. So we're going to put here, decoration. And we're going to add is some, like the typical balls that you add to the tree. So for making a circle, we're going to use a radial gradient. One thing that I didn't explain in the other one, and we didn't need it back then, but I'm going to show it now. Let's imagine that one of them is going to be red, and then it's going to go to transparent. So what we want to do now is let's place it, let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's put it in the center of the tree for now, and let's make it just 10% by 10%. So let's start by seeing the problem, because I'm using 10% by 10%. It's not a circle, it's an ellipse, because the size is not a square, and because it tries to go to all the sides proportionally, then it creates an ellipse. So let's fix that by saying go to, we want a circle that goes red to transparent. And then we can say 50%. And then will be 0. And we have our circle there. Now this looks a little bit weird. There's other ways of doing it, and I didn't show them earlier because I didn't go too deep into the gradients. You can specify if you want it to go to the farthest side or the closest side, things like that. For now, let's just focus on this one. And instead of making it red, let's again add some colors. Let's say red is going to be a slightly darker red that is not so bright. Let's see how that looks. Not much better, to be honest, but it's okay. And we're going to move it and maybe put it here on this side. So this looks like it's going to be around 20%, and here maybe at 30. So instead of 50-50, we're going to say 20% here, and then, sorry, 20% here and 30% there, because we want it like that. Horizontally, we want it 30%, vertically 20. Then we can add more of those decoration balls. And while we're doing it, let's just put it in different places, like here 70, and then we're going to put it 70 also, so it's going to be here at the bottom. This one is going to be like 20, 50, maybe a little bit lower, so make it 55. Maybe that's too much. So it's just a matter of trying different things. And the same way that, let's make this one blue. So let's say blue, and let's put someone that is white. I'm going to make it white. So we can put different balls of different colors. Actually, white may not be the best color here. Let's make it yellow. And I shouldn't be using this because this is a terrible way of naming the variables, because if I want to change the blue letters to be pink, the variable is still going to be called blue. So probably it's better if I say decoration 1, decoration 2, and decoration 3. And that way, it's not the same name as the color, and it's not that bad. And this is important that it wasn't white, because once I removed the background color that we had, you see the yellow is not really visible. So what we're going to do is that we're going to change the deco 3 and deco 2 here. That looks a little bit better. And we're going to add, maybe a couple more. So let's put 1 and 3. And we're going to be 3. Let's put 1 in 50-50. It was fine there. But not there in particular. So that was a bad choice. So let's make it 60, 80. Let's say 80 and make it 60. 60 was too much. We decided it was too much, so 54. 53. It's a little bit of a game of see where it works. So you see we have another one hanging here. This one, the dock 3, let's make it this one, the one I wanted 50-50. Maybe a little bit higher, let's make it 40. Okay. And now we have some decoration. We have the tree, we have the trunk. What can we add? Not everything is going to be, when you do CSS art, not everything is going to be radial gradients or conic gradients or linear gradients. Sometimes you want to have different shapes that you cannot, you can achieve the shapes with the gradients, but it's going to be more difficult. Also, another problem that you have is that if you want to have something rotated, right now you cannot rotate backgrounds. So it's not going to be possible to add rotation to this. In that case, what you would do is using the before and after pseudo elements, you can rotate them and then apply the backgrounds or whatever you want to them. In this case, we are going to use the, let's say, the before pseudo element, and we're going to put it here, the before. And what we're going to do is that we're going to create a star that goes on top. So first of all, for the before, it needs to have an empty content. We could use it, we could do something silly and directly put here and the star emoji and place it on top. That would be possible. And there's nothing wrong with that. Instead, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to carve a star using the before. I'm going to use the before also because it allows me to get out and overflow the container, something that I cannot do with the backgrounds. And because I was not too smart, and if I put the background color back, background color F003, you can see that I did the tree and it touches the edges. So if I want to put a star, it's going to be cut here at the top. Because of that, I'm going to use the before to be able to get out to this area. So what I'm going to say is a position absolute. And by the way, because this has a position absolute, in order to be absolute to the container, I need to add a position to the container. So let's put here a relative. And now I'm going to say display block, although I don't know if this one is needed, to be honest, after adding the absolute. Let's put a width of 10 vmin, height of 10 vmin, and a background that is going to be yellow for now. Wow, that's going to be a big star. Now we say the position is going to be top 0, left 50%, and we're going to translate minus 50%, minus 50%, so it goes on top directly. And we're going to make this a little bit smaller, 7 and 7 maybe. And this, we're going to move it a little bit more, 70, like that. So what we can do, another technique that you can do is using clip path. So you can use clip path to specify an area that is not going to be visible. In this case, we want to carve a star. So we're going to use it with a polygon. Again, this is a little bit away from the gradients before, but it's another thing that you can check, and I will put the links in the description. So we can say polygon, and then we can specify the different points where we want our star, where we're going to crop or to clip this element that is a square. So let's start we're going to start from this top, and then we're going to move it a little bit lower. Let's say 70-20, probably 65-20 is better. Then we say 100% 20. And you see now we're cropping here a little bit, so let's make it a little bit lower, 30 maybe. I don't know what I'm doing, so this may be bad. I shouldn't be doing something like that all the way here, but it's fine. It's just for fun. So let's put 70% and 50. That may be too low. And now 100%, 100%. Here a 50, 80. I don't know. Do I have half a star? Kind of half a star. So the thing that I need to do is bring this a little bit lower, and then bring this also a little bit lower. So instead of being 70, 50, this should be 60. And that looks a little bit better. And now that I have one half, doing the other half is kind of easy, and put that between quotes because it's going to be symmetrical. So we're going to do the opposite of this one. So if it was 100, 100, then this is going to be 0, 0. Then 70, 60 is going to be 30 and 60. Sorry, it's not 0, 0, it's 0, 100, my bad. Like that. and then we're going to do 65 is 35, and then we have to do, sorry, no, there's a step here in between that is 0, 30%. There is a star. Looks a little bit weird, to be honest, and it doesn't look too bright, so let me, instead of making it yellow, let's make it gold. So it's a little bit darker. It's not a great star, but it's something. And let's remove this background and make it a little bit lighter so it doesn't affect with the color that much. So that's our Christmas tree. We can decorate it a little bit more, maybe by adding some lines here. I don't know what the name is in English. Espumillón is how we call it in Spanish. So we could do something here, another one here. So let's do that. And that decoration is going to be behind the ball, so let's put it below them. Let's just call it lines for now, I don't know the name. So we're going to do a linear gradient that is going to be transparent. Let's say red for now and transparent. And see, right now it's vertical, we don't want that. So we want to specify an angle that is going to be probably 80%. Let's hope 80 degrees, sorry. 80 degrees. No, that was not what we wanted. Maybe 120. I did it the other way around. It's more than that actually. 170. Yeah, that's going to be better. So what we can do is we specify we want it to be 50%, oh no, 45%, and this is going to be 0, 55%, and this is going to be 0 again. So that's a little bit too big. What we're going to do is we're going to put it in the center for now, maybe a little bit lower, and we're going to say the size is going to be 80%, 30%. Let's see how that works. Oh, almost got it. So let's try to make it a little bit smaller, like 70%. And now instead of being, let's make it a little bit smaller also here, 48 to 52. And maybe move it a little bit to the left. And instead of being red, let's add here a deco 4 that is going to be purple. And we can say this is going to be bar deco 4. And we have it there. Now we're going to do another one coming this way. So for that one, funny thing, we just copy it, we paste it, we put the angle in negative value, so it's in the other direction. We're going to put it a little bit higher, so that's 30% for testing. We need it to be a little bit less wide. 40 is too little. Let's put 50 for now, and let's put it again in the center. In this case, because it's going up, or from right to left is going up, from left to right is going down, what we're going to do is move it a little bit to the right, 55, maybe 53, and then we're going to move it a little bit lower, like that. So now we have a Christmas tree with some decoration. We're going to remove this background color. And we have a Christmas tree that is done with a single element and a pseudo element that is the star. If I had made it, and that's where some people will criticize me later in the comments, if I had made it so it doesn't start from the top but a little bit lower, and that's something that I can still make actually. Let's undo this thing here. So if I move the leaves, these leaves here, if I move them a little bit to the bottom, and this, let's put it at 30 and 30, something like that. Yeah, that doesn't look that great because I didn't update this. So 10 and 20, let's hope. Yeah, but now that messes with everything, so that's not a good idea. But now that I made it like this, I left enough space for the star, and I could use 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 conic gradients to generate the star, and probably it would look 1,000 times better. But for now, we're not going to do it. We are done, and I'm going to undo these changes. This is our tree, and I'm going to remove the background. Maybe if you want to add something, we could add some GIFs here. That's a possibility. It would be simple in the sense that a gift is basically a square with the wrapping, and yeah, why don't we do it? It would be on top of this, and again, let's do one thing. Let's put the color back so we can use it as a reference. Let's put here a present. So the present is going to be a linear gradient that we're going to make it, I don't know, blue, 0, 0, and we need to add a comma. There it is. So now what we're going to say is going to be like 60%, 100%, so it's at the bottom a little bit to the right, and the size is going to be 10% or 15%, 10%. That may be too small, so let me double this. And if you notice, it's a square. That's too much now. I do it too much or too little. It's kind of a square. Let's move it a little bit to the here. Perfect. So this box now, what we're going to do is that we're going to put the wrapping, the decoration. So that would be another linear gradient that it needs to go on top. So we need to put it above the color. And let's do it here. And instead of being blue 0, 0, it would be, I don't know, transparent, then 45%, then red 0, 55%, and then transparent again. 0, my bad. Okay, and then we need to do the same thing vertically, and that's simple. We just copy the one that we have, and we say to right. Boom. We have now something that almost looks like the flag of Iceland. But that is our gift at the bottom. We could duplicate this. Again, we could do the same, copy paste the present, but now we make it a little bit smaller, 20, let's make it the 1510 that we were doing earlier. 1510 is going to be tiny, but it's okay. And we're going to place it instead of 70, let's put it at 35 maybe, 35 and 35. And instead of being blue, let's make it purple. Okay, we finally can remove this. And here we have a Christmas tree with some presents at the bottom. And it was done only with a single div and mostly with gradients. And as we use percentages, you can see how when we make this larger or smaller, the drawing adapts and responds to the size. That is really good. That's because we use this unit that is relative to the viewport. If we put 200 pixels, it will be fixed all the time, the same size all the time. But we want it to be responsive, so let's make it 60 vmin instead. It's a little bit larger. That star looks terrible. But just to finish, we're going to do one more thing. And is right now, if somebody arrives to this drawing, this CSS art, and they're using assistive technologies like a screen reader, they are not going to be announced anything because the div is empty. So we're going to make a small change, and it's something that I explain in a different article, and is adding a roll of image, because this in the end is an image. We did a drawing of a Christmas tree, and we're going to give it an area label that is going to be cartoon of a Christmas tree with presents at the bottom. By doing this, what's going to happen is that if a screen reader reaches our div, is going to announce it to the person as an image. And when it announces it, it's going to say something like image of a cartoon of a Christmas tree with presents at the bottom. So the person that is using the screen reader will know what this is even when they cannot see it. And with this, we have finished our small CSS art with a single element, just using gradient. I hope you like it. Thank you for watching.